Hello, this is Michael D'Amatos, and I'm going to be walking you through SQL Server Reporting Services 2016, how to create aggregate reporting. We're going to discuss the KPI indicators, and we're also going to show an example of how to build an aggregate report from a detailed report. Go back and check our work. It should be fairly simple, fairly quick. Um, With that said, let's kind of jump into it and get started. Now, what I've done, starting out, it's a little complex, is we're going to have a data warehouse. The data warehouse is going to have to be our source, our location, where we kind of add a layer of abstraction to our our data source. So our source might be an ERP system, it might be flat file, it could be a Foxit Pro database. Whatever it is, we're going to have connections to it. Those connections will be filtered through to a SQL Server instance. That SQL Server instance will have renamed columns. You can do it within the connection manager as I've done, or you could do it on the back end right here. After the loading, translating um, has been complete, you can now use your SQL Server database to create detailed reports. Detailed reports, very quickly, since this is a topic we've already discussed, are reports that just give line-by-line transactional detail from large transactional data sets. These data sets are fact data sets. They reflect some aspect of your business, and they should give you indicators as to what a particular dimension is presenting. So we have a bunch of dimensions starting out with, like department or site. I've got a product line, and then I've got the item number description. These are definitions out of the dimension product. It's kind of interesting little tidbit. We have a transaction number, like I said, transactional data. And then here's detail. Now the detail is filtered for a certain range. These transactions are between this start date and this end date. And then some of the pages to this report are filtered by this department. As we see when we click on things in SQL Server, it does a little think and can mosey on to the next section. This again and again. And then when I add filtering, it might get longer, it might get shorter. If I change the date range, it's definitely going to get longer, since I can tell you that the SQL statement that produces the report is rather large, or I'd say it selects a large data set. It's not a overtly complicated query in itself. And when I select a large data set like this, it just spins. This is, I'd say, over 3 million, 4 million rows in processing. So, that being said, SQL Server reporting services, as opposed to maybe Power BI, might not be the best tool for drilling into these large data sets when presented in such a fashion. We're still going to be talking about SQL Server reporting services itself. And as you can see here, it's probably thinking a little bit too hard right now. All right. Very large data set, lots of information. You can kind of see it's because of the web app display, it's just a little slow. Kind of hard to really get your bearings when you're scrolling through it quickly, trying to find a piece of information. There is a find section right here, but let's just say I wanted a aggregate, just a quick view of the numbers, and I wanted to drill into it afterwards. Well, that's where having a data set extracted so that you can use it for detail purposes is very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this brand new instance of the report developer. You can download this anytime you want from MSDN. It's very helpful. Every version of SQL Server down to Express, except for the web-based, comes with a and core, obviously, comes with a version of SQL Server reporting services. If you track down to the website after you the SQL Server name and then your web address /reports, you should be able to find the link directly to your reporting services server, which will allow you to jump into the SQL reporting homepage, create a new folder. Underneath that folder, manage all your reporting. When you say new and paginated report, it'll give you the option to download this application, or you can download it directly from MSDN. All right. So the same way we created the detail report, we're going to add a data set. I'm going to use an embedded data set. Actually, today we're just going to take that detailed data set we already had, which we took time to develop, and we're going to copy it straight over. This is a very quick way to get an aggregate. There's two choices you can make whenever trying to extract aggregate data sets. The first being you want to either use a detailed report to get to the aggregate, or you want to go ahead and aggregate the data to get to the report. Now, if I was dealing with a million something rows of aggregated data, do I necessarily want my SQL Server that is doing all of the transacting, the loading, the day-to-day activities to process that, or do I just want it to feed me the data? The answer really depends on your workload. So with a heavier workload comes kind of easier decision. You should move it onto your reporting services server, because that's what it's meant to do. Doing the math on the reporting services side is going to be very easy, whereas doing the math on the SQL Server side in your data warehouse is going to be heavier. It's going to take more time. So, all right, very simply, what I've done here is I've just dropped in the query. The query is very straightforward. It'll give me my detailed data set, but then I'm just going to load it. I'm going to rename this scrap rework for aggregation. Okay. So I've got a couple parameters here. I probably want to load a data set specifically for default dates. Guys, remember that it's important to name your data sets so that anyone following behind you knows what you were working with, even if it doesn't turn out perfect like that. Alright, I'm going to use some default values. You never want to set a start date or end date default value or available value to be limited by this, unless you really only want people to only have this as a selection. Then you would say available values. Let's just say the first day of the month for the start date, and then the end date is going to be the last day of the first day of last month, last day of last month. Yeah. Alright, I'm only interested in last month's information. And then these are just some built-in fields. You can put the number of pages, you can show the report folder, what the URL is, who it was that executed it, etc. So we're going to say scrap rework totals. So that's all we're evaluating here, a couple totals. So there's a couple of pretty a matrix real quick. Just add the matrix wizard, add in our main data set that we were working with. Let's say I wanted to see, across each product group, I wanted to see the scrap and rework for FN. All right, let's do it by the column group itself. We want to be the date. So individual days, scrap and reworks across all the product groups. So what I've done is for each day, be sure to name your data types, or else it'll give you a default. You might want to do something logical, like take the product group, highlight it a certain color, take the date, highlight it another color, and your totals area, you want to take that, probably work in separate color, so it's easier to read. All right, so you got your product group, you got your dates out here. My dates for scrap and rework, 6/1 across each one of these. Now I've got some totals to work with. All right. Now, if I had any other data sets, I could turn around and I could make it so that we could quickly see a variance, or we could see a goal. If I had a goal per day as a value, I could group these things together and compare our scrap versus our goal and give us another number. So this is just another method. We don't know the detail behind this, right? That's one of the things that we lose whenever we create a report like this. But we can check back in on our data. That's fairly simple to do. So using our detail report, we come back in, we say, all right, across the month, what should I see for FNMI scrap as a total? And can very quickly assess whether or not that's correct by running both reports side by side and saying, okay, here's a month's worth of data. Do these totals match? Right, so very quickly, let's scroll down to the bottom. Let's see, get 95, 615, and 95, 165.7. So we've got the right numbers across the board. This is the two values that we're taking a look at right here. They're not mapped out the way everyone would expect to see them immediately. I'm working with the data a long time. All right, so having that as a detailed report, very hard to look through. Unless I wanted just 1 day's worth of valuable data, 2 days worth of valuable data, maybe even a couple hours worth. If it were available, I could come in here and say, I want between these times, because these are time-stamped transactions. That being said, if I came in here and I wanted to know, all right, how do we do for the month? I was a manager and I had some questions, I could very quickly answer these. So there's a lot of different forms of aggregations that we could add. We could add charts, which look fairly similar. I could say as a percentage of a total, what is the total value for scrap and rework if I had percentages. in as a value. If I don't have the percentages in, I should not be using that pie chart. It's going to display very disproportionate data. Columns, you know, do a very good job of displaying this side by sides. If I've got two separate values that I'm trying to rework and scrap, and I put in the product group, I could easily track that down to a series of days for a month's worth of data. So again, you know, what's down right here? Across the days, what am I looking at for scrap and rework? So some days it's negative, some days it was positive. We give certain days back if we get to rework or if we unscrap. So it's neat little chart. There's other examples of this data working very well in sales, very well in purchasing when we're rolling up dollars across time. That's really all there is. After you get your data, you validate it, you track back your steps, how you pulled the data set, where your data source was, you get the responsible shareholder to sign off on it. Real quick, I did say in the beginning of the video we're going to discuss these KPI indicators. Something very simple about them. The aggregate data set has to be set up before you enter it into the SQL reporting services web server. KPI is entered by giving values to these different columns. The value, the one you're going to be measuring against. The goal is what your goal is that you have to meet. Usually, you should measure that against the value. Status, is it 1 is good, 0 is bad, or 0 is neutral, negative 1 is bad, so it's a kind of off and on switch there. We've got a data trend set. This can be used if you use transactions. If you look over here, using some of the quality reports as an example, I have to have a data set that represents each item. So this is the data set for last month's scrap. If I go to data preview, just to show you guys how this works, I'm going to go ahead and load it. It is running a query in the background to load in the values that we're talking about. And it gives me a standard cost, a dollar goal, a conformity, a scrap rework total, a goal percentage, and a goal status, whether or not I met that goal, according to my conformity. Now the data source actually comes from here. Under properties, if I edit in report builder, I'm going to bring up a query editor. And this query editor is where this gets the information from. All right, using that query, I've pulled forth this series of data points, and I can say scrap rework total, give me the dollar goal, give me the status, and then trend set, if I had one, would go in there, custom URL for it. This is refreshed on a schedule based in here. So this is actually where the schedule comes from. It's the caching schedule. It refreshes itself at 7 a.m. on 1st, 5th, 15th, and 20th, starting from this date forward, and then the refresh of the cache data actually happens a couple seconds afterwards at the same time. So the report will run, the cache will refresh, and life is happy for our essential KPI, which is a key performance index. It's a measurement that you will sit down and discuss with a stakeholder and come up with detailed aggregate and then KPI-based indicators to show these values. I hope you followed all that. If you have any questions on this video, or if you'd like some more examples, let me know in the comments section. You can visit the rest of my blog at mcdamatos it's mcdamatos.wordpress.com. And thank you and good night.